Hi everyone, this is Hardy and welcome to the Hidden Path Project. This is our first environment project, so I'm excited to get started. Let's jump in. So I've got our blank canvas here, and I'm just going to start a new layer and name it Sketch, and we're just going to start making some marks. So our first project, we're going to start with something pretty simple here. We've got our project brief that we've read through. This is basically going to be kind of a mysterious hidden cave path type place. So it's going to be kind of dark but have a very strong light source. It should create a really great sense of mood. In fact, for each of our main projects, I'm going to set aside a few little artist goals, things that I want each of these projects to really teach you, something you should really take home from each. And for this one, I want it to have first a very simple and very strong composition. So as you can see already here, I'm sort of dividing this into thirds, using that rule of thirds. We've got this main gap in our canyon here, and that's right along that 1/3 line. The main subject, the focal point of this, will be this sort of magic flower that I've got very roughly indicated here in the foreground, and that's roughly on the 1/3 line too. But if you'll notice that Fibonacci golden ratio spiral, I'm going to really try to bullseye that flower, that focal point, right in there. So we have simple, strong composition. I also want it to definitely have a strong sense of mood. And we're also going to really make it use strong use of custom shapes for texture. Really want this to be a great experience for you guys getting used to using that tool. And since really stone, rocky textures are all that we're going to have going on here, there's no other vegetation or any other types of terrain, just rocky, mountainous type stuff going on here. We're really just going to have one type of texture to render. We're going to make great use of custom shapes for that. It's an incredibly useful and incredibly time-saving technique. So that's sort of our little goals I'd like you to keep in mind for this project. For now though, as you can see, I'm just sort of jumping all over the place, keeping those compositional elements in mind. I've got that gap in the canyon where our light source is going to be pouring through, and I've got our little magic flower here that I'm defining on that 1/3 line as well, and inside of that golden ratio bullseye. But for the most part, I'm just making little sketchy lines to sort of define these shapes, and it really just needs to kind of be three-dimensional in my own mind, but I think that's working. So up next, we'll tackle our rough color phase. I've got a really nice technique for this. We're going to use photos and kind of warp them all together, just sort of borrowing the cool colors from each of these to come up with a color scheme. This ends up giving us all kinds of cool, unexpected results. So a great way to go rather than just trying to randomly pick colors yourself out of the color picker. So I just sort of liked the terrain and colors in this one. That's all it takes. It can be anything. And we'll just blur this to get rid of all the actual detail. All we want from this is the color. So once you blur it, it kind of removes all those extraneous details from your mind and just lets you kind of freestyle with the colors. That's why blur is always a great first step for this. And you just start transforming, copying these things around. You can use all of your Photoshop tools to grab colors from one area and lay them down in another. And I'm just finding ways to make these different color areas work together. I've blurred this new photo as well. If you ever want to repeat a filter, you can just hit Command F. So it just ran that same Gaussian blur on this new photo. And as you can see, I just copy these around, transform them to fit into these sketch shapes that we've defined. And it's just really kind of a cool artistic collage type process where you just grab all kinds of different elements, splash them around to make them work in interesting ways. A lot of times early in this process, everything starts seeming very far apart, a lot of disparate elements trying to work together, and you end up sort of unifying things as they go. So it's looking a little bit too rainbow right now. There's just so many different colors going on. So I'm going to start painting in here to sort of unify things, using my artistic eye to refine things just a little bit here, making things make sense a little bit more, and start really thinking about the color scheme that I want my finished product to have. That's what this rough color step is all about. Kind of borrowing some interesting colors, unexpected things you might not have come up with from photographs, and then making it all work, using your knowledge of color schemes and design to make this all fit the story that we're trying to tell. So That means for the most part, I want my color scheme here to be pretty warm, mostly reddish orange and yellow, because I want it to have some really interesting contrast with this bright blue flower that I'm going to save for one of our very final steps. So this one is going to look extremely warm, very warm color scheme for the most part, but it's going to really have an awesome contrast with that final main focal element that we're going to add in at the end. So that's my design thinking there in terms of color. Now, I definitely want to point out that whenever we're using photos in our artwork, we have to make sure that we blur out all of those details. Now, obviously, even at this point, we have completely obliterated any recognizable element of the photos we've used for color, and we've done a lot of painting and transforming. But whenever you're using any other photo in your artwork, you need to be very respectful and mindful that that's another artist's work. So be sure to obliterate all details and it'll be fine. I think it's perfectly cool to borrow color schemes, especially when you change them and incorporate a few different ones into your work. There are some really amazing free stock photo websites out there that I'll link in this course. And really, those are free Creative Commons. You can use them for anything, even commercial uses. So a great place to start. But the main point is to be respectful of other artists' work and make sure that you obliterate all details so that you're creating something that's truly unique and original every time. We're really seeing that warm color scheme that I was after here. Doing a little bit of a color balance adjustment here just to see if a little more cyan or blue, a little bit of coolness would make this work a little bit better. And you can also use the history brush. See, I liked how this was working in the foreground, but I wanted to keep that really burning warm color from my light source. So I just painted back with the history brush, just like we did in the foliage demonstration video. That history brush can really come in handy. Also starting to think a little more about light sourcing. So through this sort of crack in the cave wall, we see a little path where maybe that light source is hitting a little more directly. We're not so hidden in the shadows like we are from our viewpoint. So a little bit of bright, sandy terrain down on the bottom there just for some light source. Starting to really think about some of these lighting details that will help bring this to life. Another thing I've got going to sort of define these different spaces is the grain of the rocks. We've got them going in one way in our foreground, but I'm going to have it really carved out in a complete opposite direction on that stuff that we see through this crack. So it's going to be all these cool little effects that really create that sense of depth. And of course, we've got some great atmospheric perspective going on because those elements out in the distance, kind of out on the other side of this little gap in the cave wall, we really see those much lighter. The light is affecting them differently because of atmospheric perspective. They're a little farther off. So this is our first use of that maybe most powerful perspective technique that I hope you can get some great results at. I'm also using a little bit of orange in these dark near ground items to use a little reflected light. And here, of course, I'm adding a little bit of spotlight where maybe that sunshine is actually finding a way through. It's not blocked by all of these cave walls and is even shining a little bit of direct sunlight on some of these rocky elements. Really creates a cool sense of wonder. And of course, that is one of our main goals. We want this one to have a really strong sense of mood. You can just imagine some explorer kind of peeking through this path like maybe he's finally found this one spot where this flower grows. One last thing I thought I'd try is I saved a copy of this desert photo and I just changed it to soft light blending mode just to see if we could unify everything a little bit, sort of bring a little bit of this same orangish color to the entire piece. So I'm sort of warping this one. Again, we're going to blur this so the details practically don't matter. We just want these colors to kind of work in a way that helps us. Bringing a lot of really nice intense red and even that sort of greenish color from the sky is kind of neat too, is sort of an accent. So I'll blur this, and wow, I really like how that works. In fact, some of those dark bush shapes even look like cool little dark spots on our stone. So one of these great happy accidents that we can make work for us when we just try something at the very end. So I encourage you to experiment with this. You can come up with results that you really might never have come across on your own just picking colors. I'm masking out this soft light layer a little bit, but I think I'm going to keep this. I'll go ahead and merge that with my rough color layer, so it's permanent now. And with a little more touching up with the brush tool, kind of refining things, making it all fit just right before we start adding detail. But I think this is a really nice rough color statement. We've got our light source and our mood established well, so I think we're ready for the next step.